I just want to run through a couple things by way of 107, and then we can go pop over into the GIS lab and talk a little bit about Pix4D. So I've just grabbed some slides. Most of these slides are not mine, but just to run through the current state of affairs. So again, so that link that I sent you guys, I think is the best place to start in terms of if you guys do want to secure your 107. A little more background in terms of where we are with 107 is, as we've mentioned before, but just to reiterate, we used to have a classification that our drone is an experimental drone. That's usually for folks who are developing, constructing their own units, etc., an airworthiness certificate, these various exemptions. Actually, let me step back further. So the airspace in the U.S. is all controlled by what we now know as the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. The rules there say that they control all U.S. airspace from the soil surface up to outer space. This is not the same in other countries. For example, in France, the first 500 feet is not controlled, generally speaking, by their national air authority. So that's one of the reasons why we have things like Parrot and AR drones and all those things came from France. A lot of those initial companies, because they had more space to experiment with these types of devices. Anywho, so jumping forward to where we are now, as you guys know, so a couple things to reiterate. You guys as students are classified as hobbyists. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Thanks to some clarification that came out almost a year ago today, May the 4th, 2016 is when that clarification was made. To step back even further, it's important to say that the FAA has been completely, in my opinion, dysfunctional when it comes to dealing with this technology and introducing this new technology. Now, to be fair, the FAA grew up after air flight grew up, right? So after people started flying around barnstorming and this and that and whatever, and then accidents started happening, ooh, we should do something a little different, and maybe some municipality was trying to put in a rule or whatever. So the idea was, hey, we're creating a national the NAS, the national airspace. We're going to make it all uniform, and somebody that's flying from Oklahoma or San Diego, they all have the same rules. They all know what to expect, etc. So that's great. And that has served us generally quite well in this country. It's also important to say that Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area, is the most complicated, the highest density of aircraft anywhere in the world. So there's more things here, there's more complicated places here, there's more places to land here, there's more helipads, however you want to slice it, military bases, large metropolitan cores, all that kind of stuff here. So this is probably the most challenging airspace or area to operate in compared to pretty much anywhere else you're gonna go. And to be fair, we don't want to cause problems, right? We absolutely don't want to have an accident or induce some people to feel unsafe or what have you. Having said that, the FAA is, as with much of our government institutions, not maybe super nimble, maybe not as nimble as we might like in terms of introducing new rules. So where we were before, basically before 9 months ago, was you had to get one of these special exemptions. Things like, and the most common for this kind of stuff that you guys would want to do, a 333, which allowed you to do commercial activities. So just to be clear, me as professor guy, different rules than you guys as student people, right? So I'm in a we professors are in a particularly weird spot because of how we're classified. We're government, but we're actually considered commercial, but then we can't sign our own. We have to have, it gets complicated. For you guys, what you need to know is once you graduate, if you want to start working to do projects or whatever, essentially the new rules of the road are that you guys need to have this Part 107. And we've been talking about that. Strongly encourage you guys to, if this is of interest to you guys, to secure your 107 license. Chase has one, Tim has one, for example. And I know some of you guys are planning on applying for one. Um, this technically applies to commercial activity. So if you want to fly, if you are a real estate have a real estate photography business, or like Danny, if you're trying to map stuff for the gas company on contract, that kind of thing, you need to have a Part 107. If you are doing a research endeavor, right, that sort of gets into the gray line, right? Especially with something like capstone. Is that you're not getting paid to do your capstone, right? So you're not changing money, but is it really hobbyist? Strictly speaking, it's probably outside the definitions of what most people would consider to be a hobbyist. So, when in doubt, if you guys can, best thing to do is to do more training, get additional certifications just to make sure, right? And so in the case of in 107, that's what that can serve as far as your planning and as your thinking and etc. So regardless as to whether money is being exchanged or not, Part 107 is becoming the default thing. So whether you actually get paid from state parks to go fly for them, it's pretty clear that we're moving pretty rapidly toward this condition where I say, hey, I want to fly in state parks, and they say, oh, do you have your 107? So you guys should be prepared for that. So this is going to evolve into or to stay the same way, but become de facto the initial minimum qualifications to fly in many contexts. And so might as well get it now and be good, right? What's that? Yeah, it's kind of like right. Again, the critique with this is that it is literally just a written test. So you could have never touched a drone or never even been outside, for that matter. You could be confined to a bed, and you could read the material, study, for a few hours, few days, and pass this. And so there's if you guys recall, so far in our surveys, most people think this is completely reasonable. The vast majority of people think. I mean, we didn't say the word 107 at that question. We just said, an online knowledge test. Something like, I don't remember what the most recent data is, but something north of 70% of the public think that this is an appropriate level of stuff, right? So the minimum. I think a lot of us would probably think, hey, we should probably also have some kind of practical thing, be able to take the thing off, land the thing, show how you safely depower it or what have you. That currently is not part of the requirement.
So like by having your 107 and by knowing these rules and regulations, can you get in more trouble like legally if you break a rule, for example?
Oh, excellent question. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to go into this today, but just because you guys brought it up, the short version is it's unclear. Some of our lawyer colleagues might say it's not illegal to take a drone and go fly a drone, right? The FAA would have you think it is. They absolutely would like to have you think that. In fact, you might use the term intimidation, maybe. I don't know what the appropriate term is. I don't want to be disparaging, but clearly the threats that they. So this is what would happen. We have no law that says what drones can do and can't do. So we default to saying, oh, let's see what the FAA has to say. The FAA would literally put stuff up on its website and just say, can't do this. No explanation. Just say, our determination is this is not allowed. You need to get this, blah, 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 part 3333. The only people that have ever been successfully prosecuted, many have been threatened. Many people have gotten intimidation letters and things like that, cease and desist orders, etc. Normally guys that are flying on YouTube and they go some super popular video, and usually they're doing stupid stuff, right? Usually they're not advisable things. And the FAA sends them a letter, hey, you got to stop this or that. The only people that have ever been and it's only like 3 or 4, I believe. I'm sure our lawyer friends will correct me, but it's only a handful of folks that have been prosecuted. As of a year and a half ago, it was one guy, only one guy. And that person was not prosecuted for flying. That person was prosecuted for violating the FAA. He had a permit, and they said, "Oh, you violated I forget what they said. It was like you're behaving unsafe or whatever the phrase was." So yeah, exactly. So do you need this? well, maybe not. You could fight it, but pretty much no one wants to. No business would enter into a contract with you now because they're going to say, oh, this has become the new standard, regardless of whether what it was before. This is not, all these people are getting these, thousands and thousands of people are getting these things. Everybody's moving in this way. It's becoming the de facto standard, minimum standard of safe, responsible operation. So therefore, it's reasonable to expect you to go through this process. But once you go through the door, they know who you are, right? But again, yeah.
If I can share one snafu that happened actually on campus here. There was a time when the NOAA guys were coming out with Jason Miller, and they were flying at Camp Park, and apparently they didn't have certain forms or correct reference from the tower. And since I was one of the only people registered out to this area, and they were detecting drone and other stuff out at Park, I got called in the middle of class, basically and interrogated.
What are you doing, Tim?
Yeah, it's like, hey, who's flying out at Park in the area you're responsible for, without proper credentials? And they're saying oh, this is big, they can't be flying, they need to scrub this. And so, I pretty much, at that point, I passed them off to who was actually in charge of that operation, but they know who you are. I had only had contact with the tower once or twice before, but they knew to call me, which was kind of disturbing.
Big government.
But yeah, that stuff can happen.
Yeah, and so we've been in the Wild West. We still are in the Wild West of regulations and all this and that, but we're becoming less wildly west, right? We're more like Silver City, Nevada, or something like that, right? So we're not yet metropolitan LA, but we are beginning to accumulate all these different procedures and standards of operation. Again, the approach you guys should always take is it doesn't matter what the heck you have, right? You should always behave responsibly. You should always run through your checklist. You should always make sure you have safety first and foremost, checking the weather, all this and that. And generally speaking, if you guys are behaving responsibly and not, on someone's private property and this and that, again, being on someone's private property, that is already illegal, right? Unless you have their permission. So whether you have a drone or not, you shouldn't be doing these things, right? We shouldn't be looking in people's windows when they're naked or something, right? That's not appropriate when we're just you. It's certainly not appropriate when it's you with a robot flying over your head, right? So there's a bit of insanity that this technology touches off and people freak out and oh my God, our local city needs to pass a drone ban or this or that. No. Lots of people have been prosecuted for doing messed up stuff with drones. They've just been prosecuted using the traditional laws that already are in effect. We don't need additional stuff by and large. So again, regardless whether you quote unquote need this or not, probably a good idea to get it, right? So then you're covered. So we're talking about the section of the Code of Federal Regulations, and this is to do this. It says to fly our small units, they have to be registered, and so that's just a few bucks. And everybody's drone should be registered, whether it's your private one or whether it's our units here on campus, as all of these guys are. The new racing quad is not, but it will be once we get the batteries and stuff up and running. And so so it's registered. Hold on. Let's skip some of this. Okay, so there's a bit of confusion here about 333s. So 333s have not been eliminated. They've just not been, new ones have not been issued. But what they say is 107 supersedes 333, but they haven't technically deleted all the 333s, which again were the previous iteration of if you wanted to operate commercially. And there's a lot of confusion. People say, oh no, 333s, you gotta throw away your 333. No. You should, if you have one, you should keep it. It's just you can't get. They will not issue any new ones. Okay. So essentially, what we're doing when we get 107 is we're getting an exemption from the typical requirements. The typical requirements being essentially a pilot's license. And we had that conversation a little bit ago about, and we were having this conversation up until last May about should we go get a balloon license, a ballooning license, because that is an aircraft, but it's way cheaper than getting an airplane, a private pilot's license, which is typically about $7,000 to $8,000. It's the cost to go through all that. You have to go through ground school first, and then go through the actual flying of the plane. Yeah, I mean, just as an example, this 333, you had to you also had to follow all the regular stuff, which means you had to have an annual pilot's physical, right? And I mean, all this it was totally crazy. Most of the stuff that we're dealing with is not the traditional stuff that these rules were created for. So some of these rules were created back in the day for what we might now call RC planes or balloons or kites or things of that nature. We are obviously beyond that. Okay, so there's various terms that these guys will use to describe elements of our flight control system or flight operation system. So control station is how we control the craft. Even if we're doing a autopilot routine where we're doing a mapping mission where the computers and the sensors are and the GPS are determining how to fly and where to fly, you still need to operate now in the US. You still need to have the ability to take control of that aircraft should a unforeseen situation arise. So you have to have a control station. Even if a lot of these folks are selling these things as turnkey solutions, and you do all the pre-flight, pre-mission planning, etc., and you go out and you shake it or you rub your belly or whatever, and when it takes off and it comes back, you must have it. So the classic one for this is the EB, which is the foam fixed wing unit that I think we've shown some pictures of. We don't have one, but that guy comes in a case kind of like Harriet's or one of these cases, and it's got all this hard packed foam. You cannot see the control station; it's hidden. So to meet the legal requirements, they have to sell it with a controller, with a control station. But when Joe Blow opens up the case, like, oh, here's my thing and whatever, and I hook it up to my smartphone and I do the mission planning, whatever. And in this case, the way that particular aircraft works is you shake it a couple times, like, and then it wakes it up, and the propeller goes, oh, and then you do like a 360 thing, and it senses the wind speed, and then you basically throw it into the wind. And it flies itself up in a sort of a tornado of increasing diameter spins, and then it gets a sense of where it is and the wind and everything, and then it goes off and flies and comes back. So that's how 99.99% of the people use that tool, and it's a very useful tool, very popular. It's expensive. The prices are coming down, but other than the cost, it's generally very positive reviews of that device. Virtually no one knows that if you put your hand on the foam packing and shove it and move it to the side, boop, there's a controller in there. So that, again, should something go awry, you can actually countervene whatever the control, the internal sensors and stuff are telling it to do. But so you have to have a control station to fly here. When they say corrective lenses, they mean things that, just like the DMV, anything eyeglasses or contacts. So the term model aircraft has caused various issues. So the most feedback we get in terms of our survey question, which is, hey, what is this? Is this a drone? Is this a UAV? The biggest feedback we get are from remote control aircraft enthusiasts, model airplane enthusiasts, because they have many different categories of craft, and we should have had this term and that term, and etc. But in general, the kind of stuff that we're talking about is stuff in the air. This does not apply to stuff on the ground, such as what Dr. Claveau works on or Dr. Isaacs works on. Also does not apply to our underwater stuff, although all the scuttlebutt is the Coast Guard is thinking about introducing some type of regulations for our underwater units as to where you can operate them. which will be crazy. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, so key thing here is we're supposed to be maintaining visual line of sight, even though that thing over there with a big enough radio in it that could fly for 14 miles easy and come back. Even though folks are flying from the mainland out to the Channel Islands, flying around and back, which is not recommended. That's not permitted. So I'll just say don't do that. But the issue there is they want everybody to stay within visual line of sight. Again, this is a pilot. This again comes from the world of aviation, meaning that we want to, so that we don't want anybody to go over the so-called over the horizon or over the hill, and so that we could maintain our human control over the object should telemetry or something like that fail. The person that is in charge is the pilot in command, or the PIC. And again, different groups use different terms. Usually this is abbreviated SUAS for Small Unmanned Aerial System. So the kind of stuff that we use are generally systems, right? So they include a sensor, they include some way to download the data, they include this and that. The actual thing that's doing the flight is the UAV, is the vehicle, unmanned aerial vehicle. We have this totally random thing of 55 pounds, which seems to be a conversion from the metric, which it seems to have originally stemmed from a NASA number. Is essentially just like, why is it P equals 0.05? Why isn't it P equals 0.06? Yeah. Somebody just said we need a number, let's go with that, and that has been promulgated. So now the 55 pounds is the magic number. So all these things we're talking about for routine commercial operations, sensing gas, imaging somebody's backyard, whatever, they have to be small units. And for us, that's not a problem. But you can rapidly see that as these units get more powerful, and as you want to add maybe larger LiDAR units or gas tanks to go farther or something of that nature, that in the future could be a possible problem. But nevertheless, 55 pounds is the number we continually get back to. Okay, so here's the NAS, the National Airspace, and there's various images out there, but it's hard to see exactly because technically it's not a two-dimensional thing. It is a sort of a layer cake type of thing, and I think I sent this picture to you. If not, I can send it to you guys. But basically, what we're talking about here is elevation and proximity to other takeoff and landing sites for airplanes is essentially what dictates this stuff. So the really high airspace is where we're flying, the jetliners and the high atmospheric traffic type stuff. And notice everything is in feet instead of meters because it's the idiot FAA. So we have to use feet and meters. I mean feet and inches. Just like the construction industry, we have to convert everything, even though it's silly and lame units and stuff. And then the MSL is above mean sea level is what that means. So, do you have a question, man? Oh, okay. Just fixing your hair. I remember when I used to do that, when I used to have hair. Now I just polish my head. So again, as I mentioned before, Los Angeles is particularly challenging because we have so many airports, so many large airports, but also so many small airports. Whereas if we were, say, out in the middle of Kansas somewhere or Alaska, there might be an airport nearby, but that would be the thing, like the one thing. And note that the airspace is different based on if it's a major hub, a relatively small hub, which would be something like Camarillo here, which has a tower, or something that's untowered or unmanned, which is much more, there's a landing strip basically. So right here, just without going very far, we have Magoo Lagoon, right, which is a military airport. So that's another level on top of this. So military airspace is restricted airspace, which it doesn't even fall onto this category. It's another wall, don't go into. But we have that major thing. At the top of at the top of Point Magoo right over here, those golf balls, that is the radar installation for all traffic coming in from the north into LAX. So not only do we have an actual, important, lots of jets and bombers and things taking off and landing, we also have a major sensor system for one of the largest airports in the world right here. And then we have Camarillo, towered, people in a elevated tower that are looking around and talking to the pilots and giving them commands as to how to take off and land. And then we have, for example, on Santa Rosa Island, we have a traditional untowered field, which is just a raw dirt field that has a windsock. So, without going very far, we have all these potentially confusing and difficult to enter airspaces. So technically, right now, part of Cam Park is within Class D airspace, and so again, we have to have special permission for that, etc. Oh, sorry. Somebody had a question? No. Okay. Okay, we're talking about national airspace. Okay. We talked about these: visual line of sight, pilot in command, visual observer. And so just to note, so visual line of sight is one of the key constraints right now of your 107, right? And even not without 107, even the hobbyists can't go beyond visual line of sight, right? So the default is everything stays close by. Now, what does visual line of sight mean? Well, does it mean I can see that thing over there, but oh my gosh, some clouds came in? Technically, if those clouds were to come in, now we should probably start heading back, right? But visual line of sight can be a bit of a flubby term, right? I mean, if we have for a super flat plane, we could be, I don't know, a mile away, no problem, right? And could still see it. We could be in a canyon setting, and if we could be, half mile away, maybe that would be blocked. So it's always going to be relative to the situation and the weather conditions at the point of operation. It's never just I have to stay within this diameter and always stay within that diameter. Major constraints: have to stay in visual line of sight, have to fly in the daytime, have to not fly over people. I'll say it again: can't fly over people
That aren't involved in the operation.
that aren't directly involved in the operation, right? So that's what they would say. It's obviously crazy. It obviously is. This is one of the grandfathered in rules that came in. Now, I mean, it's not crazy in the sense that we don't want people buzzing over the Super Bowl just screwing around kind of thing, right? But that has gone on to, and it's become a huge thing. So the major exemptions that people, not exemptions, but modifications that we get are there's three. One is we want to be able to operate, say, in Class D airspace, as Tim was saying, or right, we want a special request to operate an area we might otherwise not be allowed into, which is a formal petition to the FAA and a letter that you get, permission that you get. One. Two, to fly at night, because, I don't know, that's when our animals are moving around and we need to, monitor them. And then to fly over people. Most typically, the folks that are asking to fly over people are in the entertainment industry. So they're filming a commercial, they're filming, whatever, a sporting event, something like that, and they kind of have to, right? Nobody's been prosecuted for flying over people. And generally speaking, we want to avoid that, right? Just because what if something does go wrong? We don't want to endanger people. But again, as you guys pointed out, some of the stuff that we do is enumerating the users of this facility, right? And so part of that means kind of flying over people. So if that comes into play, the goal there is you fly, say, just offshore. So we're not directly over the people, right? So we're not exactly 100% straight above them. We're just off to the side so we can image them, but...
Or, just like earlier this week, you notify people. I'm sure most of you got an email saying that there would be filming on campus this next week. If you, but there was an email sent out saying that there would be filming on campus using drones this next week. And if people are notified, then technically they're also involved.
Not direct.
Yeah, so again, spirit. We always default to being the most conservative, and let's make sure everybody's included and we take the highest level of safety. But when the need arises to enumerate the number of people that just got flooded out of their homes, it seems to me it's valuable to go fly over the people and count people out of their homes, right? And again, I think if we're responsible in all the other ways with our data management, not spying on people, not doing that silly stuff, behaving responsibly, we won't be in trouble, right? If we were routinely flying over downtown LA, that's maybe a different story. But yeah, okay, cool. I think a lot of this stuff is just repeating. The one thing I will say, just with regards to the drone race this weekend, is that a visual line of sight means you physical your eyeball line of sight. You can't sort of cheat by saying, I can see this with my camera from my FPV, right? That doesn't that even though technically you're saying, well, I can see the propeller in the upper right part of my view screen, that doesn't count. Similarly, you cannot operate an unmanned aerial vehicle from another aircraft. So this does not permit you getting in an airplane and then flying it around. There are some videos of people that did that from a vehicle.
Yeah.
So this doesn't necessarily exclude you from doing that from a vehicle, but you need another special waiver to do that. Yeah, so that's not the kind of stuff that we want to be a part of, right? Because we don't want to be seen as pushing the rules or trying to do all that kind of silly stuff. That's more the extreme sports guys doing that kind of stuff, right? Okay.
I've always been after it.
I remember I was going to say it was about the 400-foot thing. So for us, we have to stay. We can't go higher, right? But usually, for the type of stuff that we're doing, the bigger concern is how low can you go? And increasingly, because people are worried about disturbing organisms, so Andrew did his capstone on flushing distance with snowy plovers and various things. Increasingly, one of the other so we're worried about stuff, going. Normally, people are saying don't go too high, but the other concern is going too low, right? We don't want to disturb an endangered species or whatever, right? Cause disturbance in any way, shape, or form, or for that matter, really bug people, right? We're not trying to bug people, even if we're out mapping Camp Park. The goal is not to interfere with their enjoyment of the resource, etc. So we also have this, how low should we, what's our ceiling we need to stay above, not just below, right?
So what was the ceiling for?
I didn't do droning out there because you would have to get a special permit to drone up.
That's this year. We're gonna do that this year. We did the drone one this year.
Yeah.
But what was the distance?
For like the actual flushing distance
Yep.
of snowy plovers?
Yep.
It's like 8-9 meters roughly on average, so 8 to 9 meters from like standing distance. So I've never seen anyone fly anything above them, so I'd have no idea how the birds would react to that.
So 100 feet is probably plenty
I
fine.
forget what the lady from the Navy base when she came to talk to
Jean?
us, what she said. She said that something similar, like it was tricky to like get good pictures because they had to be
That's right.
really high.
That's right. Yeah, so the problem is the heights are all literally pulled out of people's butts right now, right? Because we don't have good data. And so it's wanting to, sure, not hurt the resource, but it's almost all guesses at this point, which is why we need to do more of these studies. So that was the first thing to say. The other thing is, so Chase mentioned helicopters. I think the other two things that are particularly problematic for us, where we tend to work in the coastal zone, are ultralights and are crop dusting. So those are things that there's been so many times I've even just been driving on the road and like, and all of a sudden, these super low crop dusters, particularly in the Santa Clara River Valley, but elsewhere too, that just all of a sudden, boom, they're going low because they're trying to get their pesticide to not disperse in the air, so they want to get as close to the plant tissue as possible, and so they are really low, right? And they routinely operate below the traditional aircraft spatial elevational targets. Those guys, and then the ultralights, which we see a lot of them right out here. on
Right on
the
the
corner of
airport.
campus. Yeah, those guys, and then just similar that kind of stuff. They're not very loud. I mean, if you're right next to them, they're loud, but it's a relatively small engine. It's behind it's in the rear of the aircraft, and so they love to come around these mountains and stuff, and so that's another one that's particularly like all of a sudden, holy cow, there's a thing there, and is our Inspire going to cause a problem for a helicopter? Probably not. I mean, we don't want to fly in a helicopter, probably not. But if Inspire hits an ultralight, that's going to be really bad, right? There's no surviving that interaction were that to happen, right? Whereas a helicopter maybe bangs on the fuselage or something like that, and but those little ultralights are really that are very small, and they're typically cloth wings and stuff. So that would be pretty bad. Yeah. So other comments or questions? Okay. So let us pop over. Why don't we take another 5-minute break? Let's reconnect over in the GIS lab.